Set against the backdrop of 1882 New York, highlighting tensions around race and social class, after the death of Henry Brooke, Raines informs Marion, the daughter, that she is left with only a mortgage and $18. Without a form of income, she chooses to move to Newport, New York on 61st with her Aunt Agnes, the head of the household. Waiting for her train, a fight breaks out and she is robbed of her purse, with her ticket and money inside it. She cries alone on a bench and a colored woman sympathizes with her and buys her a ticket. The ferries are down, so Marion convinces her aunt to let Peggy stay for the night. She is allowed to stay in the maid's quarters and is immediately disliked for her skin color, because this is the Gilded Age. Seeing her cursive writing technique and that she studied in a colored youth institute, Agnes hires her to be her assistant for the time being, writing her letters. She accepts and goes to retrieve clothes from her mother Dorothy. Across the street is a newly renovated house that the Russells have moved into. The parents consist of George and Bertha. They have two teenagers, Gladys and Larry. They try to make friends at the communal ball. They are waived to make a generous donation to the charitable events. Aurora insinuates that given the generous donation, they will be able to join their inner club, disapproving of them just wanting a chunk of their hard-earned cash. George is against the donation. Despite this, Bertha decides to set a ball and sends out invitations to all the family, including Agnes, Ada, and Marion. She is warned not to leave her confines and attend the ball, because the Russells represent the new generation and they stand for old New York. Because Larry saved her dog, Pumpkin, Marion felt obliged to attend, sneaking out with the help of Peggy. Bertha lashes out and kicks out Aurora for attending for a brief moment just to encourage her to donate. She almost lashes out again when Marion goes to leave, but George knows that her attendance is a state of defiance because they would have forbid her from coming. Peggy admits that she has aspirations of writing a book, and to that Marion admits that she just wants to be able to work a job without being kept under the confines of Agnes. Henry's lawyer, Tom Rakes, comes to New York to inform Marion that he might move there and subtly hints that he has a crush on her. He also helps Peggy with an inquiry. Agnes disapproves of her being with Rakes because he isn't wealthy but just a traveling lawyer. The Morrises are invited to the Russell estate informally. Patrick opts to going because George is one of the biggest railroad tycoons. He invites Patrick into an illegal off-the-books investment where they invest before, and once Patrick passes the bill for the railroad, their stock will skyrocket. However, Anne still doesn't like the Russells, so they opt to using a hotel suite for their event instead of their massive ballroom. Petty George buys out all the stands for the entire event, sending them all home 3 days early. Peggy is given the chance to publish her short stories, but they have to remove any trace that it was written by a colored person. Marion sneaks off to go meet with Rakes, and he professes his love for her and tries to propose. She doesn't answer yes or no yet. Oscar Van Ryan secretly sodomizes with John Adams, but by day he pretends to want a relationship with Gladys, only because her family has money and she is innocent, so she will turn a blind eye to him. After finding that the bill is being rescinded, George pulls a bold move and buys his stock on the public market, making it stay at the skyrocketed price as if the bill had never been rescinded. Anne is forced to go and beg for forgiveness to Bertha, which she turns a cold shoulder because they casted her out by not choosing the ballroom for their event. At his limit, Patrick is forced to grovel on the ground and beg for mercy, which George is not compassionate of.
I'm afraid you must face the music.
In a financial burden, he commits suicide. Anne mourns the death of Patrick. Their bill is set to pass again. Aurora is encouraged to allow Bertha to join her club, as it will appease George and herself, including her husband. She is invited to a musical event. Peggy successfully sold a story to the New York Globe. However, her father dislikes this, citing that she should be carrying on the family legacy of their pharmaceutical business. Marion attends the musical event with Bertha, finding that Rakes is there too. He is climbing up the ranks to appease her aunts. Peggy's first story is published in the New York Globe. Bertha meets Ward McAllister, the cream of the crop for their club and rarely intrigued by new corners. They are invited to a Red Cross event where Clara Barton, founder of the Red Cross, invites them to sit down. They meet with the burn victims and she hopes that they can donate as much as possible, encouraging them to reach out to Mrs. Chamberlain as she is a generous donor. Marion and Rakes share their first moment of intimacy, interrupted by Peggy. She had something similar in the past. Peggy was writing a piece on Barton and the Red Cross. Oscar conspires with Flora, a maid at the Russells' estate. She is to be a spy inside their compound, reporting back to him for monetary gain. The Russells frequently stop Gladys from meeting men. They reluct and let her invite over Mr. Baldwin. After dinner, George brings up a dilemma. As a stockbroker, he can either work for one of the biggest names in the industry and cease contact with Gladys, or continue to pursue her and make it impossible for him to work in the industry. He chooses the former and bids Gladys farewell. They find out that a train has derailed. The train derailment caused 5 lives lost. It derailed because they used old and rusty axles to save costs, but George didn't authorize this and suspects that someone is stealing from him. At a club meeting, they vote Bertha in to join their board. They invite over Ward McAllister for a luncheon, wanting to ensure they serve his every need. They ask Ballister, the butler from the Van Ryan estate, to serve them an English luncheon. He lies to Agnes about him leaving for a family luncheon, but she receives a note and finds out that he lied to her. They successfully have a luncheon with McAllister. Oscar meets with Flora for information that George is vulnerable because of the train derailment. He will have to make George appreciate him if he wants Gladys's hand in marriage. Armstrong spots them returning and reports that they are secretly dating to Agnes. Peggy's story on the Red Cross warranted the New York Globe more clients, telling Dorothy she is happy for her, but still her father disapproves. Detectives find out that it was Dixon, the leader of the engineering team, that switched the axles, but he accuses George, falsifying the idea that he was instructed to switch the axles, saying that he has proof. Larry brings up the idea of him becoming an architect, which George shoots down immediately, wanting him to follow in his footsteps. Learning of the alleged relationship, Agnes demands Bertha fire Flora, which she does so. Oscar and Agnes are still arguing about this, but he is slightly happy that it conceals from his real relationship. Agnes also won't speak to Ballister.
Ask him when it was delivered.
Marion reconvenes with Rakes at Miss Chamberlain's house. Marion isn't able to attend Edison's showing of the light bulb because Russell's car is full. Peggy goes with the Globe and Timothy. Russell's group goes to the showing. Ward McAllister invites Bertha to their house in Newport. George is worried that they don't have enough evidence on Mr. Dixon to prove at the committal hearing that a trial isn't needed. At a clothing shop, Marion finds a purse that belongs to Mrs. Dixon, returning the purse to the Russells as she works for them as a stenographer. The group leaves for Newport. George uses the purse to implicate Mrs. Dixon. As a stenographer, she would have access to all his files, admitting that she corroborated with him for monetary gain. The judge exonerates him, and George promises to make her life a living hell.
I will keep abreast of your movements. I will inform your superiors of your history and make it impossible for them to employ you. You may scrub floors to earn your bread, but nothing more.
Rakes delivers a note for Peggy, and Armstrong receives it. They think Armstrong might have read it. She admits that she had a husband and child, but she was pried away by her father. She was told that the child was deceased. Now she doesn't know where he has moved to. Admitting all of this to Agnes, she is sympathetic, but she can't fire Armstrong because she is too old to train another maid. Peggy opts to leaving and returns home. Also, Marion is heavily thinking about eloping with Rakes. Marion started her plan to elope with Rakes without the knowledge of Agnes or Ada. Meeting at Mrs. Chamberlain's mansion, they find that Rakes didn't appear. She rushes to his office to find that he doesn't want to elope anymore because he found that Miss Bingham had money and she didn't. Meanwhile, Bertha invites people to a ball for Gladys coming out, and she uninvited Carrie, the daughter of the Astors. She blames her mother for their feud, and she is forced to apologize and attend the ball, writing letters to Agnes and Ada, forcing them to attend too, something that Agnes hates. At the ball, Marion dances with Larry and Gladys with Oscar. Peggy finds out from a letter in her father's coat that her son is actually alive. Her father merely lied to cut their connection. He is settled with a new family. When Arthur arrives home, he finds that Dorothy and Peggy is leaving to go find him. Peggy takes the short trip to find her son is deceased. His adoptive mother and him had died because of scarlet fever. She reaches back out to Marion, requesting her job as Aunt Agnes's secretary back. Aunt Agnes obliges, warning Miss Armstrong that any prejudice against Miss Scott would result in the termination of her role. At church, Aunt Ada takes a liking to Reverend Ford. To the dismay of Aunt Agnes, Marion begins teaching art in the Red Cross Art School, taking a fondness to a student named Frances, who is actually her cousin-in-law's daughter. When they welcome cousin Dashiell's arrival in New York, Oscar uses this opportunity to reconvene with Gladys, to offer her a chance at marriage, giving her all the freedom she could want away from her family. Though when her father George Russell hears of this, he declines, only wanting Gladys to marry out of love rather than freedom, and that he would support her when she fell in love. Bertha is time and time again rejected from having a box at the academy. She strategizes to make her own, first showing a preview of the opera to come at a party, thus commencing the opera wars. Teamed up with Mr. Gilbert, the manager of the new Metropolitan Opera House, they set to open at the same day as the Academy, forcing people to choose a side. On the same side, George unites the railroad companies in a united front against the government legislations. The first major problem they faced was the formation of the union. Though not officially recognized, they had stopped production and undergone a strike in retaliation. Inviting the head of the snake, Mr. Henderson, to their house, he demands that the union wants to be paid more in more humane conditions, with people working 10 to 14 hours and barely being able to afford meals. On the other hand, the railroad companies could starve them out. As the standoff prolongs, the union come up with the phrase 888, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of personal time. They set up the state militia in case the strike became violent. The guards were ready to shoot until George stopped them and gave in to the union's demands. Though initially seen as defeat, George would play the long game. After 6 months, the union would be divided. Tradesmen would see themselves different from unskilled laborers, and the chance that the strike could cost their livelihood would make it almost impossible to strike again, though other railroad companies didn't see it that way and decided to leave the united front. However, his son Larry is united with his architect teacher in a different way. Once news of their affair hits the newspaper, Bertha steps in to shut it down for good, for their family name. He is then placed to oversee the Brooklyn Bridge's construction, whom he learns is a female engineer and architect. The Russells' valet learns of his daughter Flora. Estranged after his bankruptcy, she wants him to leave the position and rejoin her life as a bankrupt banker. As Marion learns more about Dashiell, Aunt Agnes pushes for them to get married, and in a grand gesture in front of a crowd, Dashiell proposes, and Marion reluctantly says yes. As a journalist, Peggy and Thomas Fortune head down to the south to report a new colored institute that is underway, with racial tension still boiling. Mr. Fortune refuses to sit by as others are discriminated against. This causes their swift departure and a lynch mob that search for them afterwards. Once everything settles down, in that moment they kiss, though this relationship can't prosper because Mr. Fortune has a wife and kids. Arriving back in Brooklyn, Peggy helps sit into a school board issue, helping to stop the close of 2 colored schools, with the integration of white and Irish children and teachers. Shortly after, Peggy resigns from her journalist job, not wanting any more distractions and wanting to write a book of her own now that she has a name for herself. Cousin Aurora Fenn introduces Oscar to a friend and potential suit, Maud Beaton, a wealthy heiress, and after many dates and picking her up from her residence, she convinces him to invest into a railroad company that is currently bidding against George Russell. As a small stakeholder in the company, his return is gigantic when the major stakeholders try to buy out the company. Learning of this, he decides to invest nearly all of the Van Ryn's inheritance into the company. Not so long after, he goes by George Russell to clear up any wrongdoing by Gladys, now that they're competitors in the same space. Though he learns that the company that he had just invested in never existed. Returning to the office, it is now vacant. Maud Beaton is nowhere to be seen, and having never lived in the apartment. When he approaches Fenn, he learns that none of them know who she is, just that she was in the group. Ruined and now potentially homeless, he turns to John in a time of need for some solace. Though life isn't as dim for Aunt Ada, she soon falls head over heels for Reverend Luke Fort, sneaking off to galleries with him and attending church more than not, so much that Reverend Fort asks her to wed, and she immediately agrees, though when the news is brought upon them, Aunt Agnes is against it. The main reason behind this is that she is worried she will be alone once Ada leaves. Marion and Oscar will soon marry off too. Against her wishes, the marriage continues, and with the words of Bannister, their valet, not to regret it in the future, she reluctantly attends the wedding. Not long lived, because signs of Luke's back pain start to worsen. He discovers that he has cancer in his back and has days to live. Administering the final prayers, Luke dies in Aunt Ada's arms, and whilst everyone is outside celebrating the grand opening of the Brooklyn Bridge, they learn of the Van Ryn's new money problem. On top of that, Marion admits that she can't marry Dashiell, not because they're cousins, but because he doesn't love her and just wants her to be a wife to take care of Francis, and she still wants to create change in the world before settling down. The Wintertons come to town. Miss Winterton is Bertha's old maid that she had sacked, though that secret is sealed. They bring with them the Duke of Buckingham to boast, but Bertha swindles him away and proclaims him to be the honoured guest on the opening night of the Met. And once Lina Astor learns of Mrs. Winterton's original role, they are removed from the Academy. Ward McAllister, playing both sides, the Met and the Academy, is made to pay the Duke to come to the Academy as their honoured guest. Nevertheless, Bertha gives him an irresistible offer. On opening night, the Met turns out to be filled, whilst the Academy is empty, with Mamie leaving the Academy for a box at the Met. The Duke of Buckingham arrives at the Met, seated next to Gladys, and inference that her hand in marriage is what was offered to the Duke. The night turns out to be a success. Afterwards, Marion and Larry fall into motion. During this time, Jack Trotter of the Van Ryn household had been working on his alarm clock, making it so that it wouldn't need oil to function. This invention earned him a seat at the Watchmakers Association, and granting him a patent of this design, and now Larry wants to go into business with him for it. The news gets better as Aunt Ada settles her husband's affairs. He had a textile fortune that he had never touched since becoming a reverend, and all of it is being transferred to her name, saving their house and all their new money problems. This is when the series ends. Make sure to subscribe, and if you like the videos I make and want to support the channel, consider joining the memberships, and for more, watch this.